Alberta Union of Municipal Associations or the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to try to get that permission. Again, it's a challenge, it's not a barrier. Okay? These challenges can be overcome. And then you always have to think, these environmental ideas, are they going to cost the city a lot of money? Well, if you think about what I've been saying, no. It's going to actually make money for the city, right? Different revenue streams. Let's develop new revenue streams. Let's try to get a bit outside of the property tax box. It can be a positive impact on the city's finances. So conclusions. At the outset, I said what I'm really talking about here, apart from the details, is a new way of thinking about problems and a new way of thinking about solutions, especially in the environmental field, but also elsewhere. And the biggest conclusion is, when we've got one of these environmental challenges, let's look at the causes of it. What's causing it? And chances are prices play into it in some way or another. Probably it's cheaper to do things in a brown way than a green way, or else a company is going to make more money doing it brown than doing it green. So let's change that around. Let's change it so that it's actually more profitable to do things the right way, to do it in a green way. Let's change things so it's cheaper for individuals to do things green. And if you don't get at those root causes of problems, it's like getting at the root of a weed, it's going to come back, right? I mean, you can snip off the top of the weed, it's going to grow back unless you get to the root of it. So what we really want is to make sure that prices are pulling in the same direction as our other programs, as our environmental and sustainability programs. They're pulling in the direction of solutions rather than pulling against them. Because we have to ask, we've created these sustainability goals. Do we actually want to achieve them? And I think probably the answer for everybody is yes. Prices can be a really powerful ally if they're pulling with us. They can be a really powerful opponent if they're pulling in the other direction. Bottom line, end question, do we want prices to be our ally or our opponent? And any people here want them to be our opponent? Not seeing any hands, that's great. So thanks everybody for your attention. And shall we have a little discussion? For anybody who couldn't hear that question, it was basically the price of a lot of goods omits the environmental cost. And is there a movement in the economics field to have that brought in? Well, there has been, for probably 100 years, the realization in the economics discipline that this takes place. And this is called market failure. And the term for when you have a cost, an environmental cost that's not included in a market price is called, it's a negative externality. So economic theory and I guess economic research has been, a good chunk of it has been very concerned about this. And so when I mention these ideas that sound very simple, I'm simplifying them a bit, but there's a really strong, solid core of economics supporting this. And it's not controversial economics. It's not ecological economics. This is standard neoclassical conservative economics. And you get guys like Jack Mintz, who's now at the University of Calgary, but was with the Conference Board of Canada, real blue blood conservative, saying we need to fix this. So the short answer is yes. In the economics field, economists have been pointing out that we need to solve this, and we need to make sure that our market prices actually reflect environmental costs. And the way you do that is by, say, adding a tax on pollution, or adding a tax on fuels that you know are going to pollute. So, and that sort of gets at what I've been talking about a different way, through economics as opposed to through municipal policy. The question was whether I knew of the challenges in getting Kitchener's DCC rates instituted and what the effect of them has been. And I'm sorry, I don't have information on either point. I think that the fact that they did it speaks to the challenges, though, and the point I was making earlier, which is these are just challenges, they're not barriers, and Kitchener somehow managed to do it. The effect of it, I think it'll probably take a while before you see the effect, because development is such a slow process and takes place over such a long period of time. I think Mao Zedong was once asked, what do you think are the impacts of the French Revolution a couple hundred years ago? And he said, it's too early to tell. And I think that's the case in Kitchener as well. The question was about the ability of Edmonton to act alone and whether it requires provincial government support, that sort of thing. Each province controls the ability of its municipalities to do things. Traditionally, municipal authority to tax and do any kind of public policy has been very restricted by the provincial governments. More recently, other provincial governments, like in BC and Ontario and Quebec, for instance, have struck a deal with their larger municipalities. And they've said, we're going to give you a special charter that's going to allow you. So the City of Toronto has a City of Toronto Act that gives it broader taxation authority. Vancouver has the Vancouver Charter, which does the same thing for Vancouver. Alberta has not done this yet. And I think it's really high time that Edmonton and Calgary got together with the provincial government and said, look what's happening elsewhere. We're big cities. We have big city problems and big city financial needs, and we need the authority to do this stuff. So if you wanted to do something like a fuel tax, you would definitely need provincial authority to do it. Other areas, the municipal governments have a lot more latitude to. So if it's something around property taxes or development cost charges, to pick a couple of examples, the city's going to have a lot more latitude on those issues. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it is time to start treating cities like they're actually responsible entities. So the question was about elasticity of demand and choices on housing and transportation, and I suppose other things too. So elasticity of demand is economics jargon for if you change a price, how much is behavior going to change? And we can see that in some circumstances, elasticity is quite low, meaning that the behavioral change isn't going to be very high or very fast. So fuel taxes is probably one of those. If you raise fuel taxes, are people going to drive a lot less right away? Well, some of them will, and some people are going to, maybe 5 years from now, when they buy a new car, they're going to buy a smaller car. So these elasticities vary over time, and the answer is it really depends. It really depends on the amount of time that you've got, how confident people are that you're actually going to go through with your plans, as opposed to just sort of announcing them, and a host of other things. Generally, I think in Europe, the experience, and they've been using environmental pricing reform for a lot longer than we have, they try to set up predictable changes in price, and so individuals and firms can see what's coming down the road and make the right decisions. So they've had high fuel taxes, to pick that example again, and they've had them for a long time, and they've announced in advance when they're going up, and people can look at that and say, I'm going to be buying small cars from now on. And that's exactly what happens. So if you plan it out and announce the plan for the future, I think the elasticity question gets mitigated a bit. So the question was, can I provide a few examples of social inequities that could be caused by EPR? So yeah, I can for sure. Suppose that we decided to charge people a lot more for their water usage, and just to encourage water conservation. And we did it in a kind of a dumb way, which was to just say, everybody's paying more. Doesn't matter how much you use, you're paying more. Well, water is a very important thing for people to use a lot of. I mean, for sanitation purposes, it's a public health measure to provide water, okay?